After living with my parents for 28 years, buying my first house was quite an adjustment. This was in July 2022, so I moved in recently. My house is a 30-minute drive from my parents' house, so we're not that far apart. At my parents' house, I would always be woken up at night by my dad going up and down the stairs. He's an insomniac and constantly needs to get water or go to the bathroom. Having my own place meant I would finally get peace and quiet. But my dad passed down his poor sleeping habits to me because I'm a very light sleeper too. The layout of my new house is as follows: a small unfinished basement with a laundry and boiler room, a first floor with the living room, kitchen, bathroom and dining room, and an upstairs with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. One bedroom I use as an office and another as a workout room. For the first few days, my dad was over to help me move in furniture and set the place up. Most of it was done after that, with just minor decorating left. About a week after moving in, I was practically done with the furnishings and fully settled. One Sunday night, I could tell I would have a hard time sleeping because I was wide awake. I took a melatonin and a sleeping pill to help, and within an hour, I was out like a baby. Usually, when I take these, I sleep through the night without waking up. But this night, I woke up. A sound from outside my room woke me. I was so dazed and confused, freshly woken from an intense dream, that I wasn't thinking clearly. The noises from outside my room were familiar, footsteps going up the stairs. My dad, as usual, waking me with his middle of the night trips. I tried to ignore it, still in a daze. Then it hit me. Those footsteps couldn't be my dad's. I snapped back to reality and sat up, listening. The footsteps stopped. Now fully awake, I wondered if it was an auditory hallucination, something engraved in my memory that I heard in my half-asleep state. I nervously called out, "Dad?" No one responded. I went out into the hallway and turned on the lights to each room I passed. When I reached the stairway, I looked down and saw a tall man in a mask at the bottom, looking up at me. It didn't feel real that I was staring at an intruder in my house. I didn't see any weapons, but I wasn't about to fight him. I screamed at him to get out of my house, my voice shaking. Believe it or not, he turned around and left through the front door. I ran down the stairs to lock it behind him. As I called my dad, I heard the back door slam shut. There was a second person in the house I hadn't seen. I was freaking out. My dad picked up, of course, because he's never asleep. He questioned why I was calling him and not the police. He told me to hurry, so I called the police. The operator asked me a million questions while I waited. When the officers arrived, they interviewed me, asking for a description of the intruders, what they stole, if anything, and which direction they left in, and what vehicle. Unfortunately, I didn't see them leave, so I couldn't answer those questions. I only knew one of them was tall. It didn't seem like they stole anything, but I didn't have anything of real value on display on the first floor. They had entered through a kitchen window, just big enough to climb through. Experiencing a home invasion is something you always hear about on the news, but never think will happen to you, especially right after moving into your first house. I wish I could have been more help to the police in identifying them. Now, I sleep with a knife next to my bed. When I bought my current house, my next-door neighbors introduced themselves right away. They were both very kind. My house is on a canal, and I wanted a waterfront property because I have a boat, so it made sense to keep it in the water in my backyard. However, having a house on a canal means sacrificing privacy, since the house across the canal can see right into my yard. From the beginning, even when I first viewed this house, I didn't like the house across the canal. It looked run down and was an eyesore when I sat in my backyard. For almost 2 weeks after moving in, I noticed that the house across the canal was always dark at night. I wondered if it was a second home for someone. But one night, things changed. On the same day, my brother helped me launch my boat and bring it to my dock. I noticed a light on in the house across the canal. In the room with the light, which seemed to be a living room, there was a man standing there looking outside. So someone was living there after all. The man was in sweatpants and a long-sleeve shirt, and he looked like he had grayish hair. From that distance, he seemed to be around 50 years old. It seemed like he might be looking at my windows, but he could have just been looking out into the yard, even though it was pitch black outside. I closed my windows and went about the rest of my night. The next day after work, I went outside to plant some grass seed in the yard. I couldn't help but notice the man standing at his back door again. This time, I knew he was watching me. We made eye contact, then I looked away. I didn't want to wave, as that would be weird. I tried to pretend I didn't notice him staring at me, as if I was doing something wrong by being in my own backyard. One day, I had friends over to take the boat out. Both when we were leaving and coming back, I didn't see the man at his door. I had only seen him twice, but already I was paranoid whenever I was outside and always looked across the canal at his door. A few nights later, I looked out my bedroom window again, and he was at his door again. I wondered how long he would just stand there. It was so bizarre. I turned off my lamp and stood just beside the window, peering out to see if he'd keep standing there even after I turned the light out. He did. I must have stood watching for 3 minutes and he wouldn't move. I shut my blinds and continued with my night. I told myself to ignore it from now on and keep my blinds shut after sunset. I went to bed, wondering how I would confront the situation, or if I even would. I considered going out to the dock to wave or talk to him, or even knocking on his door to introduce myself, but that sounded stressful. That same night, while I was in bed, I was starting to drift off to sleep when I heard something in my backyard. Someone was walking on the deck. I went to the window to get a look, but couldn't see from my upstairs window. I'd have to go downstairs to see, but before I could, there was a loud crash from below. It was the sound of shattering glass. I ran downstairs to the kitchen to grab a knife and call 911. I saw the backyard window was broken, with glass on the floor and a brick laying there. I was frightened that someone might be hiding in the room, but to my relief, there wasn't. I called 911 and requested the police come quickly. Before they arrived, I peeked out the broken window into the yard and turned on the back deck light. Whoever did this had already run away, which was good because they didn't come into the house. When the police arrived, I showed them the window and brick and told them it was likely the man across the canal who had been watching me. They asked if he had any reason to have an issue with me, and I said no, as I didn't even know the guy. I asked them to arrest him, but they said they would go over and knock on his door. When another police car came to my house, the first 2 officers drove over to the house. When they came back about 20 minutes later, They said nobody lived in that home. A neighbor told the police that the house had been foreclosed on months ago, and the old tenant was evicted a while ago. I don't know much about foreclosures, so I asked if it could have been someone from the bank. They said their guess was as good as mine. They recommended I install some cameras outside my house in case the harassment continued. The police left one of their cars parked in front of my house to make me feel safer with the window being broken. The next morning, I went over to that house and tried opening the front and back doors. The front door was locked, but the back door was unlocked. I quietly opened the door and took 2 steps inside the dark, empty house and heard something from upstairs. I ran back to my house. The police car was still outside. That day, I had my window fixed and soon installed doorbell cameras in the front and back of my house. I haven't seen that man again. I still don't know if he's still there, who he is, if he threw the brick through my window, or why. Knock on wood, things have been fine ever since.